Hi, my name is Lynn and welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to discuss the different terminology or jargon that you may encounter at an SCA event. SCA stands for the Society for Creative Anachronism, and pretty much the SCA is a nonprofit organization that studies and recreates the years 600 to 1600. I say pretty much because that 600 to 1600 is a little fluid. So if you decide to go more for 400 AD, if you want to be a Pict, if you want to be a Roman, that's fine. Just the same, if you want to teeter into the 17th century and go for like 1602, that's fine too. But before we get started, please select thumbs up that you like the video. It helps with the algorithm. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. And please click subscribe and ring that bell to be updated when new videos come out. So when I went to my first event, well, actually let's go before that. When I was first introduced to the SCA, I was working as a server at a restaurant, and my manager told me that if no one else showed up in the next 5 minutes, I was allowed to leave. And at the time I was in school, it was late, I was tired, I had homework. But next thing I know, a group of 14 comes walking in the door. And at first I was really bummed because I had to stay, but they were all dressed funny. And so I started to ask questions because they were all dressed, some were more Renaissance, many of them were more medieval. And I started asking questions, and then I was given information. The following weekend, I went to their next meeting, and the weekend after that was a local event that I went to, which means I met them, and then 2 weeks later, I went to my first event. So at that first meeting, I met maybe about 15 to 20 people. And then the following weekend, when I went to my first event, there were probably well over 300 people at that event. So at my first event, it was a little nerve-wracking that I pretty much did not know anyone there. And then to be hit with various terms where I had no idea what they were talking about. So I'm hoping that this video will help anyone who is new to the SCA or still new-ish to the SCA to help learn what everyone is talking about. So with the following terms, I'm going to try to kind of group them in different groups, but some you might find one term might overlap from one group to another. The first group that I want to talk about is people. The one term that you will definitely hear in the SCA is Scadian, and a Scadian is simply a person who is in the SCA. A gentle is just simply referring to any person. Populace is referring to the group of a kingdom or of a local group. You will a lot of times hear this term used during court, and I'll explain what court is in a minute, but you will sometimes hear, well, all of the members of the populace. One term that you may hear is either a peer or peerage. Peers are laurels, pelicans, masters of defense, or chivalry, and each of these has their own art form. Masters of defense are masters of fencing, and they have been awarded to that order by the king and queen of their kingdom. So masters of defense are masters of fencing. Chivalry are masters of armored combat, and you will typically find that the masters of armored combat, the chivalry, they are referred to as knights, and they get to have the word sir put in front of their name. So if hypothetically I were an armored combat fighter, which I'm not, but if I were, and then the king and queen felt that I had mastered my art, then I could become Sir Lynn Fairchild. But you will find that with knights, they typically wear a white belt, have spurs on their boots, and also wear a gold chain around their neck. The next peerage is a laurel. A laurel is one who is a master of arts and sciences, and they are deemed a master of arts and sciences by the king and queen of their kingdom. And finally, the last peerage is pelican, and pelicans are masters of service. Again, they have to be awarded to this order by the king and queen of their kingdom. Another term you may hear is squire. A squire is a student or a master of arms to a knight. A student to a laurel is known as an apprentice. A student to a pelican is known as a protege. If you hear of royal peers include viscounts and viscountesses, dukes, duchesses, counts, and countesses. For someone to become a count or a countess, this means that they have one crown tourney and they have been king and queen of their kingdom for one reign, and then once they step down as king and queen, they are awarded and become a count and countess. If they have entered in one crown tourney a second time, when they step down as king and queen for a second time, they then are elevated to duke and duchess. You may hear the terms minister, mister, mistress, dame. These are terms that peers can put in front of their name to signify that they are of that particular order. For example, if I were a laurel, which I am not, but if I were awarded to the order and elevated to become a laurel, then I could become Mistress Lynn Fairchild. The next group that I would like to talk about are officers or people in charge at events. At an event, you may hear the term autocrat. Autocrat is the person in charge of the event. If you hear the term feastocrat, feastocrat is the person in charge of the feast. You may also hear of the hall steward. The hall steward is the person in charge of the hall, and they work in conjunction with the feastocrat. So the feastocrat is working in the kitchen, preparing the food for the feast, which is at supper time. But the hall steward is the person in charge of clearing out the hall and organizing the tables and the chairs for everyone to sit down to then enjoy the feast when the food is served. At an event, you may hear of the royal presence. That is the area surrounding the royal thrones. Another term you may hear is water bearer. A water bearer is a person or persons who are helping to supply the water or maybe the Gatorade to the fighters on the field. That could be for armored combat or fencing, or even youth combat. Water bearers may also have snacks such as oranges or pickles, and they will also help monitor fighters for any signs of exhaustion. A couple of terms that you will hear at both events and also business meetings would be a marshal and herald. A marshal at an event would be the marshal in charge, and they are the ones who organize the day's fighting and also oversee all of the fighting for their area. So there might be a marshal in charge if there is armored combat, and then there would be a marshal in charge if there is fencing. There is also a marshal for youth combat. There is a marshal for archery. There is a marshal for thrown weapons. You get the idea. And then you will also hear of a herald at an event, and the herald, there are a couple different types of heralds. You have those that go around the event announcing whatever the current announcements are. For example, if all day camps have to be broken down to make space for feast, they will announce that and go around. There are also heralds in court, and the herald in court announces a name and then what award they are receiving and why. Other officers that you will hear more of in a business meeting rather than at an event, but at an event you may also hear these terms, and one would be seneschal. And think of the seneschal as the president of the particular group. So it might be your local group, it might be the barony, but you have someone in charge watching over everything and making sure everything gets done in a timely fashion. That is the seneschal. Another term you might hear is the chronicler. Think of the chronicler as the secretary of the group. The chronicler is the one who takes down the notes for the business meeting. The chronicler is the one who makes up the group's newsletter and either mails it out or puts it up online, or both. Another term you will probably hear at a business meeting would be the exchequer. The exchequer, think of as the treasurer. They are the ones who control the money and keep an eye on finances in both the bank account and then help with collecting site fees and making sure that the group is up to date and positive in their bank account. For being new to the SCA, one term you will definitely want to remember, and that is the chatelaine. The chatelaine is the person who is pretty much in charge of welcoming new people and helping show them the ropes, explaining things, helping them find loaner garb if they need it. Another term that I just put out there is loaner garb. And loaner garb, most groups have maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 tubs, depends on the group, how big they are, but it is garb that has been donated to the group to use specifically for new people. And so if you are new to the SCA and you go to an event but you don't have any clothing to wear, just ask for the loaner garb and they will be able to provide you maybe with a tunic, maybe a dress, and then you can wear that for the day and then just return it when you are done using it. Another term that I just used a moment ago is a tunic, and a tunic, think of as a long t-shirt. The event you might hear of is a crown tournament. A crown tournament is where combatants can enlist to fight in the crown tourney. And in a crown tournament, pretty much think of a bracket system like you would find with basketball and March Madness. And you slowly work your way down to where there are only 2, and then whoever wins is now going to be crowned prince or princess. And then they are, depending on the kingdom, they might be prince and princess for 6 months, and then king and queen for 6 months. So with that comes a coronation. So you have one crown tourney, and now you are prince and princess. When it is time to step up as king and queen, you will have a coronation event, and the whole event is based around the coronation of the current king and queen stepping down and then probably becoming count or countess. They might be becoming a duke or a duchess depending on their standing, but they step down, and then the prince and princess now become the new king and queen. There are other things that happen at a coronation. There might be some fighting, there are probably some classes, so it's not just one thing going on. You have multiple things going on, but the coronation is the main thing for that event. Another event term that you might hear is an investiture. An investiture is when a new baron and baroness are stepping up to become the next baron and baroness, and the former baron and baroness are stepping down. Another event term you might hear of is Twelfth Night. Twelfth Night celebrates the Epiphany, which is on January 6th. Some Twelfth Nights, just due to scheduling conflicts, 12th night might be on, say, January 12th, January 15th. It's when you can get the site and it doesn't conflict with another group's event in a certain radius. But 12th night is not a fighting event, but you will find many arts and sciences classes. You will find people probably dancing, wearing their finest garb, and it is just a fun day to hang out with your friends, socialize, and take some classes. Another event term you might hear of is a collegium. And a collegium, just think of a day full of classes. So you could go to a collegium and at 9 a.m. take a class on baking something. And then at 10 o'clock learn how to sew a leather pouch. And then at 11 o'clock take another class on making a particular type of shield. You could take classes that focus on kumihimo. You could take classes that focus on Viking clothing. It just depends on the collegium, which teachers are there and what they are teaching that day. But a collegium is a day, it's an event, which is a day full of classes. And personally, I think it's a lot of fun. And for the next set of terms, these are just general terms, and they're not in any particular order. But one thing that you might come across at some point is AS, or Annus Ciatatis, and that is referring to which year it is in the SCA. So, for example, say you go into court, which I don't know that I ever explained what court was, and that's a good term to know. When you're at an event and you've had your fighting, the fencing, everything's done for the day, people are settling down, and usually, not always, but court tends to happen, and then you have feast afterwards. But court is where the king and queen, or the prince and princess, the baron and baroness, whoever is the highest in the royal order, They sit up front on their thrones, and then everyone else sits and faces the royal presence, and they have a herald announcing who can step up and what award they are being given. And then we cheer for everyone, and then that person sits down, and then the next person goes up. And it's just, court is a great way to be recognized, but more importantly, to recognize others. So you're sitting in court and you hear the herald call up someone's name, and as they are processing up towards the royal presence, the herald will be reading off the scroll, and at the very end of the scroll they will put who signed it and say Annos Sayutatis, and then what year it is. And for that, May 1st is the first day of the SCA calendar, and that is just because of when the first event was. The first event was on May 1st, 1966, and so that was Annos Sayutatis 1. And so then starting May 1st, 1967, that was the second year. And then 68, May 1st, 68, that would be Annos Sayutatis 3. And you will find that with these years, we use Roman numerals to signify the year. Another term that you will probably hear at some point, and that is the BOD. The BOD is an abbreviated form for Board of Directors. And the Board of Directors are members of the SCA that have been publicly nominated to that group. And they help direct the nonprofit organization, the SCA. If you are near anything such as the armored combat field or the archery field, the thrown weapons field, you will hear certain terms such as clear and hold. If someone yells clear, that means, for example, say you are at the archery range. Well, you've shot your bow and arrow, you've put down your bow, your arrow is out there, you have to wait for everyone to put down their bows. So once the marshal has looked down range and announced that the range is clear, archers may then go collect their arrows. But depending on the marshal, you might hear that they will say range is clear. Other times they might just yell clear. Another term that you will hear, especially on the armored combat field, and that is hold. If you hear hold, think of the game freeze. If you hear hold, you freeze exactly where you are at if you are on the armored combat field. It means that something has happened where someone might possibly be injured. We'll just put out a hypothetical situation. For example, there's armored combat fighting going on, and say a 3-year-old manages to run out on the field. Well, you will hear people yelling hold because the 3-year-old obviously is not wearing padding, a helmet, anything, and they could easily be stepped on or hit by something. They could be injured. Not a good thing, so you yell hold, and then you hold the position. It could simply be like during a crown tournament and the fighters are in the middle of fighting, and maybe one of their laces came untied, maybe an elbow came loose, and then they have to hold, and then they freeze their position and say their elbow came off, and as a temporary fix, someone might come up and take duct tape and tape their elbow back on, and then they will be allowed to continue to fight once everything is clear. I may have mentioned this term before and maybe not clarified what it means. When I talked about laurels at the beginning, a laurel is a Master of Arts and Sciences. Arts and Sciences is also abbreviated to A and S. A and S, or Arts and Sciences, are simply the crafts and skills of the arts of the Middle Ages. If you are interested in becoming, say, an armored combat fighter or a fencer, you have to be authorized. And what that means is you go to your local practices, and after you learn what is or is not allowed, for example, you may not be allowed to do certain shots. You might be able to learn what is a killing blow, what's not a killing blow, what is allowed to be hit, what's not allowed to be hit. And after you learn all of this, then you could then ask to be authorized, and you will have someone else do your authorization, probably at an event. And if you are deemed safe to fight, that you know the rules, you know the limitations. So once you have ask to be authorized, and then you go through the authorization process. If you pass, you are now allowed to fight at events. But before that, if you are not an authorized fighter, you are not allowed onto the heavy combat field or onto the fencing field until you are authorized. Another term that you will probably hear is lord or lady. A lord or lady is someone who has been awarded their award of arms. And with this, they might wear a circlet. A circlet is a simple metal circle that goes around the forehead, and this helps to signify that they have received their AOA, or award of arms, and that they are a lord or a lady. And thinking of arms, if you hear of the term arms, this could also refer to your device, and this is what you have chosen to help signify your person. This is where you would want to meet with a herald to decide what has not been used already and create your own individual picture that symbolizes you. It could be, well, for example, with my personal device, it is a white sheep rampant on a purple background. If you hear the term blue card, this simply means that if you have received your blue card, that means you have paid your annual membership to the SCA, you have received your blue card, and the blue card also says that you have signed the waiver. And so if anything happens to you at an event, pretty much it's on you. However, say you have paid your annual membership fee, but you did not sign the waiver, then that means you will receive a white card, and then at every event, you have to sign the waiver when you sign into Troll, or the front gate. That is yet another term. Depending on the kingdom, you might just see where it says gate, you might see where it says Troll. This is when you first enter the event. You might be allowed to park first, or there might be a line to troll in or go through the gate, pay your entry fee. If there's feast still left available, you can get your feast tickets then. And there might also be a schedule for the day, so you pay your entrance fee if you want feast tickets and get your schedule, and this is known as gate or troll. And it is here at the gate that you would sign a waiver if you have not signed a waiver already. And I'm sure you've heard me mention this term quite a few times during this video without explaining what the term is, and that is an event. There are different things in the SCA. You have your meetings, which are business meetings. Depending on the group, it might be once a month, it might be twice a month. And that is at the business meeting where you discuss anything going on specific to your group. If you have an event that you're planning and what needs to happen, what jobs still need to be filled, what's already been filled, that's what you would discuss among many other things at the business meeting. The event is something that, well, it's an event. It is an activity that a group holds. They find a location. Let's see, I'm trying to think of how to explain an event. For lack of anything else, I think of it as, well, similar to when we were planning our wedding and the reception. A group has to decide we are going to host an event, and then you have to find a location and secure a date, make sure that that date and location works with the kingdom calendar, that there is not another event going on 20 miles down the road. Depending on the kingdom, you might have limitations on, it might be 100 miles, 200 miles, that you cannot have a conflicting event with another event. So you've secured the date, the location. Now what can you have at this day-long thing, or is the event a weekend long, a week long? That's where many things are determined by the location, the date, what's going on, and also how much does everything cost and how much can your group afford. But just think of most events as being a day-long activity. Another term that you heard me refer to earlier with loaner garb, when I just say garb is referring to pre-17th century clothing. And with that garb, specifically the loaner garb, another term that is associated with loaner garb is gold key. So instead of saying loaner garb, if you want to ask for the gold key, you can ask for the gold key. there when you troll in, or you go through the front gate, depending on the terms in the kingdom. But you go to the gate, you pay your entrance fee, you sign your waiver, you have no clothes, you can ask for the gold key and let them know, I need a size small, and then they will try to find something that will fit you. Another term that you will hear, and it varies from kingdom to kingdom, it could be Huzzah, it could be Hubbah, it could be Vivat, and that is just simply a way of cheering your congratulations. So we'll just create a hypothetical situation, and Lynn Fairchild, me, has been called up to get my AOA. They have read my scroll, and at the end, the herald will say, "For Lynn Fairchild," and everyone will go, "Hubbah," or "Huzzah," or "Vivat." So it's just a way of, when you're clapping for the person to cheer, and instead of going, "Hoo, hoo, hoo," you can do a more medieval form and say, "Huzzah!" Another term you might hear at some point is a demo. A demo is a demonstration, which is, depending on the event, it could be held, say, at a library, at a parade site, at a festival. A demo, it can be held at different places. I have a previous video, and I'll have a link below for it, and that's where we had a local group do a demo or demonstration at a Comic-Con. And a demo is pretty much a demonstration of, say, fencing, heavy fighting, arts and sciences, just to show off what the SCA is, explain it, provide more information in case anyone is interested in joining. Another term you might hear at an event might be dry, damp, wet, and these are terms used at events to signify if any alcohol is allowed. If it is dry, that means absolutely no alcohol. If it is damp, that means it can be discreetly alcoholic, meaning I could have wine, but I can't be drinking it straight out the wine bottle. It has to be in a glass that you may not know what is in my cup. Same with beer. You can't be drinking it from the can or the bottle. It has to be in a cup where no one sees the bottle and no one knows what's in my drink. That's discreetly damp. Or you have wet, and wet just simply means you could be drinking the wine straight out of the bottle. Just throw away your trash when you're done. Another term that you might hear in the SCA, and I think it's slowly being worked out of the SCA, but you might still hear it from time to time, and that's the word mundane. Mundane is simply referencing anything non-SCA. However, I think the other term that is starting to be used instead of mundane, and that is modern. So if you want to refer to, instead of saying in my mundane life, my non-SCA life, you would say in my modern life. But again, mundane or modern, that's just simply referring to anything not SCA specific. Another term that you might hear is persona, and persona is the person that you have decided to become, to create. And this might also be where you would want to speak with a herald when you are trying to decide on your device for your arms. This is also where you might decide, what name would you like? What kind of person do you want to be? Would you want to be a Viking? Do you want to be 15th century French? Do you want to be 16th century English? This is where you get to decide your name, your backstory, and create who you are. The only kind of caveat to this would be you cannot be someone who actually lived. For example, I couldn't become Anne Boleyn because Anne Boleyn was the second wife of Henry VIII, so I could not be that. However, for me, I chose Lynn Fairchild. That was the name that I created and who I am in the SCA. Another term you might hear if you attend a feast at an event is a remove. Remove or removes simply refer to the courses of the feast. So, for example, you might hear that there are 3 removes. The first remove or the first course might already be on the table, and that might be bread and cheese, maybe some honey butter. And then the second remove will come out, and that might be a meat dish with another side dish. And then the third remove or the third course might be the dessert. So a remove is a course. And there are many more terms out there. that I don't know that I can list all of them, so I've been just trying to give you the most generic terms that you will probably hear at an event. Other terms you might hear is a melee. If you're watching armored combat fighting, it might also be with fencing. If it's a melee, just think of large group of fighters over here, large group of fighters over here, and then they run across the field and then they fight one side versus the other. That's a melee. Another term you might hear if you are interested in heavy combat fighting, you might hear the term Florentine. So you're fighting with two swords. You might hear the term sword and board, and that simply means that you're fighting with sword and shield. There are many other terms that you'll hear hanging around fighters or becoming authorized to become a fighter, like a gorget or your helmet. You might also hear it simply referred to as your lid. Specifically, you might hear pop your lids because if, say, it starts to rain and you hear thunder and you see lightning, you will hear someone probably yell, pop your lids, and everyone's trying to remove the metal as quickly as possible because who wants to be wearing metal in the middle of an open field with thunder and lightning? Off the top of my head, other terms you might hear of are like a shire or a canton, and these are simply groups that are within a barony. So with that, to help make it more hopefully easily understandable, think of a shire or a canton as your local town or your local city. Think of your barony as your local state, the state that you're in. And then the kingdom is the country you live in. And with that, there are various kingdoms and the map of the known world. The known world is all of the areas that have people that participate in the SCA. And so with that, you will find that the known world covers North America, goes into Europe, Australia. So if you're new to the SCA, and if there are any terms that I have not already mentioned that you don't understand or have questions about, please post your questions below and I will happily answer them. Thank you for checking out my YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video and would like to watch more of my videos, please follow the links on the side of the page. Remember to select thumbs up that you like the video. If you have questions or comments, please post them below. And please click subscribe and ring that bell to be updated when new videos come out.